COVID-19 continues to change how we live and work around the Great Lakes. We checked in to see how some of the people and industries we've shown you in the past are moving forward.
Last June, we introduced you to Planted, a hydroponic farm in Detroit. At the time, they were delivering greens and microgreens to local restaurants. With the COVID-19 pandemic, that client base dried up, and Planted had to find a new way forward.
We decided that we wanted to take the risk to stay open. Since we made that decision, we've sold almost every leaf of lettuce that we've grown.
Hygienic procedures in place, Planted jumped into the ready-to-eat salad business, making door-to-door deliveries across Detroit and beyond.
Quickly, the Detroit market showed us that they really did want to continue to buy local produce, which is wonderful. So we took the opportunity to pivot. If we go right to the customer, then we're able to offer them slightly lower prices. Just seems to be a real win-win. We're still growing microgreens, greens, and herbs, and we do put some of each of those categories into every ready-to-eat salad. But then we're also going to be buying from some of our friends for additional fruits and vegetables and nuts that will go on top of the salad. As always, margins are a little slim for us because we're growing in this high technology environment. But we're still building. We're constructing our next 2 grow rooms. We just started this week when the new executive order allowed for construction. So when we have that supply available, then we'll have even more volume and hopefully even more affordable prices. We really hope that people understand the value of local foods, because now all of a sudden we're intimately aware of how interconnected our world is. And when any aspect of it shuts down, then it really does compromise our ability to feed our families.
In Lake Superior, off of the Keweenaw Peninsula, lies Buffalo Reef, a vital spawning site for whitefish and lake trout, but it's under threat. Chris Korleski is the director at the U.S. EPA's Great Lakes National Program Office.
What we're dealing with in Buffalo Reef is literally 22 million cubic yards of what we call stamp sands that were generated by the copper production industry. Over time, that huge mass of material, which was piled up on shore, it's sloughing off into the lake itself and moving out towards and covering the reef.
The mining waste has already covered 5 miles of shoreline, and it threatens the fish that spawn on Buffalo Reef in 2 ways.
One, it contains copper. If you have much of an accumulation, more than an inch thick, it can be toxic, both to plant life and to fish life. The bigger problem that we're struggling with right now is the sand being a very fine particle as it washes over the reef. When it fills in those spaces between the cobbles, it's no longer available for spawning.
The fish on Buffalo Reef are vital to commercial and recreational fishing, and to the Keweenaw Bay Indian community. So the lake bottom is being dredged, and piles of stamp sand on the lakeshore were moved away from the water.
They got rid of those vertical slopes and pushed that material as far back as they could to try to make it look much flatter and much more level. So at least you didn't have that huge potential amount of just piled material ready to fall into the lake.
It's a step, but no permanent home has been found for all that stamp sand.
People are working very hard, but finding a long-term solution is not going to be easy.
Ed Verhamy is an environmental engineer at Lemnotech, which created and maintains the buoys that act as a detection system for harmful algae blooms in western Lake Erie. Because that data helps safeguard Toledo's drinking water, Ed's work is considered critical, and it continued despite the pandemic.
We didn't always know that these monitoring projects were critical. When we started monitoring the Great Lakes in real time and making data available, these were research projects that were mostly funded with academic researchers with the Toledo water crisis and monitoring harmful algae. This is the first time we've really had to ask folks, is this critical infrastructure? And the answer was yes. These plant operators rely on this data to understand what the lake is doing. I mean, the goal of having these sensors is so less people have to go in the field to check on the bloom. Our university partners are really struggling, being classified as research and professors and students. They're not quite as able to get those critical designations, and their support systems aren't as strong. So it's going to be a much different community monitoring the bloom this year.
One of those university partners is Laura Johnson, director of the National Center for Water Quality Research at Heidelberg University, where water sampling had to be scaled back.
With the pandemic, essentially our campus has been closed since spring break. We do want to protect our technicians in our lab, and so the question has been, well, what are the critical samples and what aren't? Typically what we do, we have 23 sites, we usually take 3 samples a day. And the reason we do that is because if we get a big storm, we want to capture all of the changes in that day. So the first thing we did was we were like, well, we're not doing that anymore.
The center's sampling effort now prioritizes the Maumee River, which brings in most of the agricultural runoff that fuels the Lake Erie algae blooms.
We did go out just today to collect samples, and we're analyzing prioritized samples right now. So not everything. We are doing everything we have for the Maumee because that's directly linked to the bloom. So it's not as informative as normal Heidelberg quality data is, except for the Maumee, and we're going to at least have 1 sample a day for there.
Mother Nature's cycle of understanding it, like it doesn't stop, it doesn't change these relationships. So we're going to miss a big gap in research this year.
To me, bloom size and bloom severity is critical, and it's something that the whole community needs to understand and be ready for.
Captain Dave Spangler has been running fishing charters on Lake Erie for 29 years. In a normal year, his bookings start the 1st of April, but this year, Ohio's stay-at-home order meant he couldn't take customers fishing.
We lost all of April, so there's 4 weeks, and the first 2 weeks of May before we did get the okay to go ahead and start May 12th. So that business is lost for this year. I've had calls that people had already had one booked, and they called and said, we're just not comfortable, we don't think we'll come, we'll reschedule next year. I've had that part, and then we've had about the same calling, okay, we want to go fishing.
Things aren't exactly back to normal though. Certain precautions must be taken for safety.
I only put 4 people aboard the boat instead of 6, and I do the extra cleaning that we're supposed to be doing to make sure that the next crew that goes on is not going to have any effects of what we did from the previous day. Right now, the fishing is fantastic, and there is a reason this place is called the walleye capital of the world, and it is that good out there. So I guess to anybody that wants to come, call a charter and get out here and go fishing, because it is unbelievable.
Thanks for watching. For more on these stories and the Great Lakes in general, visit greatlakesnow.org. When you get there, you can follow us on social media or subscribe to our newsletter to get updates about our work. See you out on the lakes.